news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's on go, roll, y'all. It's Roland Martin, yeah. Rolling with Roland now. He's funky, he's fresh, he's real, the best. You know he's Roland Martin now.
Vice President,
Roland
glad to have you here. Ready to bring the funk?
I'm trying. I'm trying.
Let's get right to it. So
Okay.
right before I walked out there, someone posted a clip, and usually the clip, I'm not going to sit here and say I'm going to do anything specifically for African Americans. But folk don't talk about what you said right before when you said that public policy that benefits black folks, it benefits everybody else.
Right.
Even we look at historically, Civil Rights Act, Voting Rights Act, it actually didn't just impact the African Americans, it impacted everyone else. But talk about that, because so many people have only clipped that one part without understanding the public policy implications.
That's too bad. That's too bad. I'm sorry to hear that. Right. So you know that, I mean, going back even before, but Dr. King was very clear, right? If you have certain policies that recognize, one, that not everybody starts out on the same base. If you have public policy, and I'm talking about economic public policy specifically at this point, but if you have public policy that recognizes historical barriers, and what we need to do then to overcome, first speak truth about them and then overcome them, that in the process of doing that, not only are you directly dealing with the injustices and the legal and procedural barriers that have been focused on black folks, but by eliminating those barriers, everyone actually benefits, right? And I know that to be true. So my policies include what I know is going to have a profound impact on black folks around economic policy, but everyone will benefit from them. I intend to create as president what I have named an opportunity economy that taps into the ambitions and the aspirations and the dreams of the American people, and then addresses those in a way that recognizes, unlike my opponent who was handed $400 million on a silver platter and then filed bankruptcy 6 times, not everyone has access to those kinds of resources, but when you give people access to those resources, they thrive and we all benefit. Opportunity economy. That's why I say I'm going to make sure that we give first-time home buyers a $25,000 down payment assistance. Because again, we know that when you look at the history of how black folks have been denied the opportunity for home ownership, be it redlining or what we know it's still been happening around a bias in home appraisals, that it is a barrier to achieving intergenerational success. But when we address it by doing things like helping folks get their foot in the door with a down payment assistance, they will have the ability to be on that track of intergenerational wealth building. My plan for extending and expanding the child tax credit, $6,000 for the first year of a child's life. Because our parents, just like any parent, have a natural desire to parent their children well, but not always the resources to do that. So $6,000 in the first year of your child's life helps you buy that car seat or crib or the clothes that are necessary to build the foundation for that important phase of their development that gets them on the right track. I do
want to do the housing piece, because what I think is not being talked about, the building of new housing stock.
Yes.
And so because of the home foreclosure crisis, we literally built under 9 or 10 million homes in 2010, 2020. And we're underbuilt now as well. The fewest homes being built since the 1940s.
Yes.
So a huge part of this problem with housing is that we don't have the stock. So talk about that piece there, because you've got demand, but you don't actually have right now the available homes.
So, and I'm glad you actually presented the point the way you did, because let's also go back to what you know in my history on this in terms of being Attorney General. When I took on the big banks, and because they were doing predatory lending, and a lot of the folks who were targeted with that predatory lending were black folks. who are being told, oh, you don't need to worry about it. We're going to give you this money. And so you can buy a home without actually doing the analysis to figure out if they'd be able to afford to pay it back, right? And folks trusted the banks that if you're going to loan me the money, then you must have determined I have the ability to actually, right, be able to see it through. And the foreclosure rates for black homeowners during that crisis.
53% of black wealth wiped out.
That's exactly right, Roland. I took on and sued the big banks and ended up delivering $20 billion for the homeowners of California. The former President Obama recently mentioned the fact that I actually took on the Department of Justice and the administration saying, I'm not going to do a deal that brings crumbs to the table.
But not just when you're Attorney General, because even right now, the DOJ, Civil Rights Division, the redlining lawsuits, mortgage discrimination.
We have been taking all of it on. Mortgage discrimination, also discrimination in home appraisals. We've taken on the fact that, you know, those stories about a black family is trying to get their home appraised. They want to get a second mortgage. They want to sell the house, whatever. And they bring in the appraiser. The appraiser looks around, looks at the family pictures, and appraises it for less than it's worth. The family knows that. They're not stupid.
The black folks got to remove photos,
so
books,
then they
DVDs,
remove photos and everything else, right? They remove
all the blackness.
All of that. And then they ask a white family that's a friend of theirs, come in, they put up their pictures, and the house gets appraised for more. Racial bias, we're taking that on for the first time. And I want to give due credit to former Secretary of HUD, Marcia Fudge, for being a leader on that. These are the things we've taken on. And as president, to your point about supply, I'm going to create tax incentives for home builders and developers to build 3 million new housing units by the end of my first term, because a big part of jacking up the prices has been the supply is not meeting demand, so the prices are higher. And when you couple that with $25,000 down payment assistance, we have the ability to give people the opportunity to achieve what generations before called the American dream, but which has been out of reach for too many people. My work around thinking about how it's going to directly impact black folks is knowing that when you look at racial bias in home appraisals, when you look at the disproportionate rates of black home ownership to other people having home ownership, it's too low. And it's not because we don't aspire to have a home or buy a home. My work is about looking at small businesses, knowing they're the backbone of our economy in the neighborhood, in communities, and giving folks an extension of a tax deduction. So it's not just $5,000 for a startup small business, but $50,000, because nobody can start up a small business on $5,000.
I'm glad you mentioned small business. I was talking to a black restaurant owner in Houston, and we were talking about the corporate tax rate.
Yeah.
And one of the things that he said was, he said, listen, I'm looking at her proposal. I'm looking at what was the place beforehand. He said, because when it got cut, it puts $500,000 in my pocket.
Yeah.
When I was in Georgia, Senator Warnock's campaign in 2022, a black woman said, hey, she said, I get reproductive rights. She said, but I'm not having any kids, but I do care about taxes. Yeah. And so that's one of the things that I'm hearing from a number of African-American business owners who are saying, okay, what will Vice President do if she's president deal with corporate tax rate? And so you talked about increasing it. Will that mean a certain cap? So let's say if you 50 million, 100 million revenue or less, will that go up, or will that corporate tax rate apply to all businesses? So
first of all, the corporate tax rate years ago was in the 30s. So I'm not doing that. But in terms of tax cuts for middle class families, my agenda is all about tax cuts for middle class families and no tax rate hike for anybody making less than $400,000 a year. But my approach is also about giving 100 million Americans a tax cut in terms of middle class tax cuts. Donald Trump, on the other hand, first of all, like he did before, he will do again and has pretty much pledged that he will give a tax cut for billionaires and the biggest corporations. Donald Trump has indicated that basically what I call a Trump sales tax will be in place, which is a 20% tax on everyday goods and services, which economists have estimated will cost the average American family $4,000 more a year. Goldman Sachs.
Including the small businesses.
Of course, including small businesses. Not to mention what he is doing. If you look at Project 2025, what they're proposing in terms of cutting off, for example, we see Hurricane Helene, what we have seen happen in terms of Milton, cutting off the SBA ability to give small businesses that have experienced an extreme weather event, a disaster, giving them additional resources. This man don't want to help small businesses. He cares about the kinds of people who run the businesses he runs, big developers, billionaires. He's not looking out for middle-class folks. You look at what he is proposing in terms of cutting, if you look at the cost that middle-class families bear, healthcare costs. We have capped the cost of insulin at $35 a month for seniors. Black folks are 60% more likely to be diagnosed with diabetes. Under Project 2025, they would undo that $35 cap. You look at what he is planning to do that is about getting rid of the Department of Education and Head Start programs. Who do you think that's going to affect? So there is, first of all, a danger in terms of understanding. There are two choices in this election, and understanding what Donald Trump intends for middle-class families. Two, look at it in the context of how he actually thinks and talks about black folks in America. And you and I have talked about this before. He is not looking out for folks when he was a landlord and would not rent to black families, sued for it. When he took out a full-page ad in the New York Times against those 5 teenagers, black and Latino, who were innocent, saying they should be executed, the Central Park 5. When you look at the first black president of the United States, and he had birther lines, and now you look at black immigrants, legal immigrants in Springfield, Ohio, and he gets on a debate stage and says they're eating their pets? Come on. This man is dangerous. Not to mention Roland. Let's fast forward to right now. His staff won't let him do a 60 Minutes interview. Every president for the last half century has done one, anyone who's running for president. Everyone has done it, except Donald Trump. He will not debate me again. I put out my medical records. He won't put out his medical records. And you have to ask, why is his staff doing that? And it may be because they think he's just not ready and unfit and unstable and should not have that level of transparency for the American people. There's a real choice in this election.
You mentioned the Department of Education. I was on a call a couple weeks ago, Jeffrey Canada, Steve Perry, Jalen Rose, and others who are supporters of school choice, parental choice. Yeah. And what they've complained about is that you haven't heard a lot about education in the last several months. And they were talking about these educational outcomes of African Americans post-COVID. Yeah. And they said the numbers are depressing. Yeah.
It's bad.
In terms of your focus with education, one, do you support public charters? Do you support, how do we deal with those numbers? Because at the end of the day, if our kids are staying behind, that's just going to make it even more difficult for them. For sure. When it comes to getting jobs. That education plan for America, if you're president.
Yeah, so I have supported public charters, but here's the thing that we have to just focus on in this election. First of all, Donald Trump would get rid of the Department of Education, which means that as a vehicle for funding a lot of what we need to do around public education for our children, it would mean get rid of Head Start. And we know how many of our children have benefited from that in the earliest stages of their development, which are the most critical to them being able to be successful as they go through the educational process. So there is a huge contrast between me and him. And frankly, I don't think he wants to talk about education, which is why it has not become an issue on the debate stage, because he doesn't have a plan, which takes me back to a fundamental point. He doesn't have a plan for much of anything that is about the people who are going to be watching this interview. I invite everyone, always and again, watch his rallies. He will talk full-time about himself. He will talk about his personal grievances, and he will not talk about you and any plan that he has for you or your children or your future.
How does it make you feel when he trashes black cities? So in 2020, he talked about voting in Fulton County, Atlanta, Philadelphia, Detroit. There was a partial recount of Wisconsin, only in Milwaukee. The comments that he just made about Detroit basically being a living hell.
Oakland, D.C., Chicago.
Pretty damn ad.
Come on.
Pretty good damn ad y'all dropped out. I actually liked it. Jamel Hill and I talked about it. But again, he's singling out cities where there are significant African Americans, and that's who he's talking about, black people.
Yes. There's this whole. I talked with somebody once who said, if you just look at where the stars are in the sky, don't look at them as just random things. If you just look at them as points, look at the constellation. What does it show you? So you just outlined it, Roland. What does it show you? That the cities that he picks on in terms of black population or black mayor are both. Come on.
We're in North Carolina, and this has been a battleground over voting rights. Mm-hmm. Federal judges 8 years ago said there was laser-like precision targeting African Americans.
Yes.
That is still a major issue. You got the Supreme Court with their decision regarding Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act. Yeah. And so what if Congress doesn't move, what can you do to shore that up? Because that continues to be a major issue. And with so many African Americans now moving from northern locations of Midwest back to the South, we're seeing these problems in Mississippi, Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, Texas, and others.
Well, to your point, you mentioned North Carolina, which has been well documented. You look at, even though I must say that North Carolina has a governor in Roy Cooper who has tried to do everything he can to ensure that voting rights are intact, but he does not have a veto-proof majority in the state house.
Plus, Dems lost the Supreme Court as well.
Well, and so, I think that we should all, whoever's in North Carolina watching this, Josh Stein running for governor, it's going to be very important. Pay attention to those state house races, because those, if they can change the balance in the state house, then they will be able to push through more protections for voting rights. But to your point, in Georgia, they passed a law preventing people from giving food and water to folks who are standing in line to vote, which is the height of hypocrisy. Because, what happened to love thy neighbor, right? There is a full-on intent by some to attack hard-fought, hard-won freedoms and rights, including the right to vote. And part of it, if you track it, is if you look at the successes that we had, in particular in 2020, and in the height of a pandemic when people just said they were going to vote, they knew and they understood how important it was. Thereafter, you saw in state after state attempts by state legislatures to make it more difficult for people to vote. And here's what I would say to your listeners. Don't let anybody take you out the game. There is an intent to make it more difficult. There is an intent to suggest to a lot of folks that their vote won't matter, with the intention that people will not vote, which is an attempt to silence folks. And what we know is the greatest progress we have achieved is when we jump over those obstacles that have been purposely laid to do what we know is about progress. And this election is going to be no different. They've already started with the misinformation and the lies. We know that there is foreign interference, and I have to say to everybody listening to this, don't let them take your voice. Because I was part of the Senate Intelligence Committee when we investigated Russia's interference in the 2016 election. Black folks were targeted with misinformation because there was an assumption that you're already targeting a group of people who already have learned, based on a lived experience, that things aren't necessarily designed to work for them, and manipulate that in a way that suggests to people that their vote won't matter. Because if you do that, they won't vote. That was the intention.
You said don't let them take you out of the game. What do you say to a young black woman, a young black man out there who is seriously considering the couch, who said,